Good morning. Today
Good Christmas.
is December the 5th. It is the first Monday of December. This is a big month, Christmas month. And this morning we're going to be talking about the ninth and 10th commandments, along with Baal and Siaga, if you know what I'm talking about. We'll be talking about all those things and more, a little bit more, this morning on the Dear Church podcast. Welcome to the Dear Church podcast, where we exist to fill your ears and your minds with the study of God to see the world as disciples of Christ. My name is Sam Yang.
And I am Saint Nick. Alyssa.
I'm Chinsuk.
Thank you. So speaking of Saint Nick,
Alyssa.
He punched the guy.
Slap the guy.
I thought Martin Luther punched a guy.
No, Martin Luther did no such thing.
Saint Nicholas punched a guy.
Aurelius.
Oh, it wasn't Satan.
Huh?
Aurelius.
No, that's the Roman Emperor. I
wait,
got you.
Wait, who is this? Who punched who?
It's legend that he struck
Okay.
Arius for his heretical views.
Arius Sabellius. Anyways, so he was against the Arian controversy. Wow, Saint Nick,
Yeah,
more
that's a good
reformed
guy.
than you would think, right?
No, so Santa Claus is awesome, isn't he?
I don't think Santa Claus is Saint Nick though.
No. Represents Saint Nick.
But Santa Claus isn't real, so he doesn't represent anything, as a matter of fact. What do you mean? Why did you look at me like that? Santa isn't real, everybody. I hope that you weren't playing this in the
I
car
hope there's
with
no
your
kids
children.
listening to this.
Yeah, but if they were, anywho. Pastor Gene, today we have a big plate of goodness in front of us. And those are the 10 commandments. Today we'll be talking about commandment number 9 and commandment number 10. Before we continue on though, what is your most favorite Christmas gift you've ever received? I think you told me. I think you said it was Power Rangers, but I just want to double check.
What? No. Power Rangers are way after my time.
Was that mine?
Yeah, I think it was yours.
Was it? Or what was your most favorite Christmas gift of all time?
I guess the most memorable one that I have was, I forget. It was a Transformer. It was huge. It was like one of those city Transformers.
Dang. What's a city transformer?
It transforms into like a city.
No.
Like a building?
No,
Well,
like a city.
Like has
Like a
little
full
buildings
city?
inside.
That was a thing?
That was
Wow.
the thing.
What about you, Junes? Like, what was your favorite Christmas present ever?
I think when I was in like second grade, I got a PC game CD for a SpongeBob game. That's the most memorable.
How is that the most? Okay, anyway. That's fantastic.
So yours was a Power Ranger?
No, mine was probably Boston Celtics tickets.
Huh.
Oh, I shared this story before. When my wife, my girlfriend at the time, got me Boston Celtics tickets and I got her a candle and a notebook.
Pencils.
No pencils. Just notebook and
notebook
candle.
because she's a teacher.
No, it was like a diary-ish with an Eiffel Tower because she'd just come back from Paris or something.
Was
Yeah.
the game fun?
It was very fun, yeah. But anyway, I guess that's a lesson for everybody. Don't do that. Speaking of lessons, we're talking about the actually, speaking of my humor level, sorry, we're really just having a slow start. But did you know someone said recently that I have great delivery but mid material? Do you think that's accurate? We'll be talking about commandment number 9, and this is Exodus chapter 20, verse 16. You shall not bear false witness against your neighbor. Typically, when people think about this commandment, they think you shall not lie or you shouldn't lie. But that's not what it says here, right? It says bear false witness. So what does it mean to bear false witness? Is it the same thing as just simply lying? Is that what it is?
What do you think? You already said most of your answer.
No, I'm just, Yeah, I'm wondering.
You said typically.
Yeah,
So,
typically.
so are you atypical? What do you think then?
I think there's more than meets the eye.
Oh yeah, how
Is what I
so?
think. It's a little deeper.
Since you're gonna be off soon because of your kid, why don't we have some questions go to Sam? Let's see if he's Sam wise or Sam not so wise.
I think, yeah, there is a little difference. Not a difference, but subtle. It's a little deeper than just lying. For example,
Okay.
when you say bear false witness, is it just talking about in court? You know, is that what it's talking about? What is?
Under oath.
Yeah, under oath. So, Pastor Eugene, yeah, what is it?
It means lie.
Just lie.
No, obviously not. I think some people do take it that way. Some people think it's any lie is breaking the ninth commandment. And that's a little difficult for me to, really side with. It can't be just lie. And then there's the whole Rahab question. Did she sin by lying?
Yeah, I'm going to ask that.
Yeah. But then first, we should get into what it means to bear false witness. What does that mean?
Yeah.
And so it means to give bad testimony, right? To say something false about, your neighbor.
Yeah.
I think so the 9th and 10th are interesting because it adds your neighbor. So it can't be just to bear false witness, period. It needs to be bear false witness against your neighbor. And I can see why some people just want to keep it to you shall not lie because they don't want to go into dangerous territory, especially if you are teaching your kid about the 9th commandment. I know a lot of parents teach their kids, it means you can't lie. And while that may be a simple way of teaching the 9th commandment, and I don't think that's necessarily terrible or bad, it's not complete. So as they grow, you need to continue to tell them. I remember as a kid, I thought lying was just plain. So we won't get into lying. It's not talking about lying, but even is lying a sin? Yes or no?
Yes.
Is it?
Because you are bearing false witness by lying, but not all lies bear false witness, or do they?
They do.
They do.
That's the definition of a lie.
Yes,
Okay,
so
so
yeah, so they do.
Okay, so is it a sin?
Yes. To lie?
Yeah.
Yes.
Jansuki?
Maybe.
So I'll give you another conundrum. When I was growing up and I was a teenager and I was in the car with my dad. I said, Dad, lying is a sin. And then he posed a question. He didn't say lying was a sin, yes or no. Because I remember as a kid, you might be familiar with this. A lot of kids maybe. I don't know. Now we have cell phones. It's a completely different age. So if you're a Gen Zer, you have no idea. I don't think you can relate to this. Perhaps you do. Perhaps in other ways, like answering the door or something. But if the phone would ring and then someone would call and then they would say, oh, is your dad home? I would go, Dad, someone's here calling for you. But sometimes my dad would say, tell people I'm not home. And then so, as a good Christian kid, what's the classic story? You pick up the phone and then someone goes, is your dad home? How would you respond? You would respond by saying, my dad told me to tell you that he's not home. Right? So that's the classic response because you're taught not to lie. And so when I did that, my dad got very, very upset with me, obviously, for obvious reasons. So if your dad tells you to tell the person, let's say someone's at the door, and because the phone thing doesn't relate now, someone's at the door and your dad's like, if it's for me, tell them I'm not home. And then you answer the door and they go, oh, is your dad home? How would you respond?
He's not home.
Wouldn't you be lying? Isn't that a sin?
Yeah, but I ain't a snitch though, so I can't.
So you would rather break your
No.
conscience against God than with your father?
I think actually, wow, this question is doublefold. Doublefold? Twofold. Because
A 5?
yes. So am I honoring my parent, but they just told me to disobey God. So really, what do you do here?
So did they tell you to disobey God? That is the question, right?
Right.
Okay. So This is why the ninth commandment is fascinating to me. I really like the whole debate on Rahab and stuff like that. For me, it being not simplistic doesn't mean it's not clear. So I think there is clarity. It's just not as simple as people say it is. So let's get into that. We won't get into the bearing false witness against your neighbor. We'll leave that against your neighbor out for now. So bearing false witness. Is it a sin to bear false witness? And then there was a little heaviness in the answer. You're not that clear. So when you're out in the battlefield and let's say, you're fighting the Russians, and, the Russian forces are coming after you, what do you wear if you're in the army? You usually wear your uniform or camouflage or camel gear, right?
Yeah.
Camel gear is designed to deceive.
Right.
It's designed to bear false witness. Are you sinning by wearing camouflage? Does anybody think that they're sinning if they wear camouflage to deceive the enemy?
No.
Why is that the case?
Because they're bad neighbors.
What do you think, Jansuki?
It's like a protective thing.
It's a protect. So if you defend your country, or if you've been, ordered to defend your country, it's okay to lie then? So I'll give you another one as you guys think about that one, okay? I'll give you another one. Can you be a spy as a Christian?
Yes.
Your whole life is a lie. Your whole life, you're lying to the people that you love.
How deep,
you're lying to Christians, right? Because you might be in a church community and you're lying to them about who you really are. And if it's an enemy territory, you're lying to everybody inside the whole country about who you are. Can you be a spy? And so if you look at Joshua and Caleb, what were they?
Yeah.
They were spies, right? All right, here's another one. If you're lying, you're not really being honest about who you are.
Yeah, that's true.
So technically you're bearing false witness. Are you breaking the ninth commandment? And it is against your neighbor. Literally, everyone, actually. Not just your neighbor. What does it mean? So I think first point is, if you interpret commandment number 9 as just simply lying, I think it is perhaps a simple way to teach your children, but it is not complete, because you most definitely would have asked your kids to lie. I don't know, sometime or someplace. You definitely asked them to lie, and then they're probably confused because I thought I wasn't supposed to lie, so I'm doing a bad thing.
Right.
For my mom and dad. So for my mom and dad, I can sin. So maybe that's what you're teaching. If you don't make it clear that what you're doing right now isn't technically lying. I guess the question came up where Christians would be invaded or raided by the Nazis in Germany, where they would be hiding Jews. And then when they would say, are there any Jews here? Christians would say, no. Are they technically lying?
Right. Well, they are lying.
Are they
a lie.
sinning? Yeah. Are they bearing false witness, meaning are they breaking the ninth commandment?
I think it's a complex answer.
Well, at the conference that we were at earlier this year,
The Ligonier Conference.
I think they posed this question, and one of the panelists answered by saying what they're essentially asking is, are there any Jews here for me to kill? I think that was one take that I heard, where you could answer no, and you're like, there's no Jews here for you to kill, but there are Jews in the house.
So it's kind of like, I think what that person was saying was that the question that they're asking is not really the question that they're asking. Therefore, you're answering the question that they're asking, but not really answering the question that they're really asking. No, you're answering the question that they're really asking. You're not answering the question that they're asking.
I don't know if that's the question that they're really asking either.
Yeah.
Because who knows if they were going to kill them. I'm sure they were going to kill them, but it's maybe they were just doing their job. So we're inserting. So that question, I think a lot of people enjoyed, except for Burke Parsons. And Burke Parsons really took a step back. And I really enjoyed Burke Parsons' answer, which was a little longer.
Mm.
which is why we're taking a little longer to answer this one. What does it mean to bear false witness? Because you could take it and be like, oh, it doesn't mean lying. Then you're just going to lie up the wazoo. Well, I'm not really lying if I say I don't have this for them at this time
Right.
because I need it, or that kind of thing.
Right.
If if a bill collector comes and saying, you need to pay this bill, like, well, I don't have this money. And then in your head, it's like, for you, that kind of thing. So that's technically lying. That is a sin. So what does it mean to bear, you shall not bear false witness against your neighbor? And I think that's why in this first part, it's about your neighbor. So here, I think that's where the scribe, between the scribe or the lawyer and Jesus, him asking, well, who is my neighbor, was such a great question. It was such a great question. And then Jesus gave even a better answer by telling him the parable of the Good Samaritan. Okay. And so in the end, what he actually establishes is that the Samaritan is the neighbor, or the Samaritan treated this Jew like a neighbor. It's actually really deep. So are Samaritans the neighbors of the Jews? That you could get into that question, because Jews did not consider them neighbors at all in that sense, right? And so Jesus really did a number on this lawyer or scribe. And I really think that the question that the scribe posed is genuine. This is what a lot of people, and wanting to trip him up, sure, but it is something that people really have a hard time answering. If you say it's okay to lie here in this instance and it's not okay to lie in another instance, who gets to decide that?
Mm-hmm.
When do you decide that you can lie on certain instances and when you can't lie on certain instances, right? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. And so a lot of philosophers and theologians have tried to come up with an answer to this. I think a good kind of very basic starting point could be, are you lying to save yourself? That's a good question. Okay.
Okay.
Are you lying to save yourself? Okay. So are you saving yourself by lying? Or by lying, are you putting death to yourself? Does that make sense at all, what I just said?
So that's one of the parameters that you would think through?
I think that would be the first basic foundation for me.
Uh-huh.
So by lying, am I just trying to save myself, meaning get myself out of a sticky situation? Or by lying, am I putting myself to death?
Okay.
Meaning what Christ has commanded us. You know what I mean? By carrying the cross and following him daily. Is that what it means? Is that what I'm doing when I'm bearing, let's say, what
False
seems
witness.
to be false witness?
Mhm.
Right.
Mhm.
And so in the end, that's why I believe the scholars have eventually come up with this whole, the two sides of this, Decalogue, which is love the Lord your God with all your mind, heart, and soul, right? And number 2 is love your neighbor as yourself, right? And so if that's the case, then that will help us understand the 9th commandment. So when I bear false witness against my neighbor, am I loving him as I love myself? If the answer is no, then you are bearing false witness against your neighbor, which is a terrible, terrible thing, right?
Mm.
So there are times where I am to bear false witness, and those times may be rare. They may be, very spread out, but they could be times. And are they technically sin? And this is where I think the debate is it sin? Is it a necessary evil? That kind of thing. Is that a sin or is it not a sin? And that means, does God promote deceit? If you're saying something is not a sin, that means it is a good. That means God is
Right,
promoting
right.
you to basically lie in our standards. It's a lie, right? So that's where the debate is, right? And I think, to be honest, for me, the reason why the 9th commandment is pretty amazing is I'm not sure if I'll fully be satisfied until I go to heaven. But I mean, I'm always willing to listen to whatever anybody has to say. But I'll always bring up the camel question. I'll bring up the spy question. I'll bring up, the Hitler Nazi question. Are you sinning by doing that? And, are you saying that I'm just going to completely tell the truth? I'm going to be a soldier in the battlefield and wear zero camouflage. So I'll stick out like a sore thumb so that my position, and not only my position, the position of my entire platoon gets exposed. Is that what it is, right? There is no entertainment, no acting, that kind of thing. Is that the kind of world that you see as perfect, is ideal, is utopia? And if not, then is acting a good, right? I can see why people are might be very, I don't know, on edge on answering this in a very clear-cut manner. But I think what is clear-cut is what I just said. Am I bearing false witness to benefit myself to the detriment of my neighbor? Then that's bearing false witness against your neighbor. Does that make sense? So if that's the case, then I think then that is a clear violation of commandment number 9. So when we get to Rahab, do I think that she sinned? I personally do not think that she sinned. Does that make sense?
So just to kind of summarize, the key word in verse 16, commandment number 9, is you shall not bear false witness against. So you're saying the key word is against your neighbor. And so the focus isn't necessarily the false witness, but it's the against. And so, for example, let's just say I have false witness. Is this the question that I would ask myself then is, does this false witness benefit me to the detriment of my neighbor? Or does this false witness benefit both of us? Or does this false witness obey the commandment to love my neighbor as myself? So that's the first question that you would ask in this scenario then.
Yeah. So I'll give you another question that my dad asked. Let's say, so he's been through this because he was a pastor until he retired for many, many decades. And there's a woman lying in her deathbed because of cancer, and it's spread throughout her whole body. Her whole body is swollen, including her face, and it's now deformed.
Mm.
And then when she sees you, she goes, "Pastor, am I beautiful?"
Mm.
What do you respond with? Do you say yes?
Yeah.
But you're lying.
Not necessarily.
So you've convinced yourself you're not lying. Because you're saying that is beauty then. Being swollen, being ravaged by cancer, being on the deathbed.
Right.
You're saying that is beautiful.
Right. And normally it wouldn't be, because that is the effect of fallen world disease.
What do you think, Jansuki?
Right.
Like inwardly beautiful.
No, that's not what she asked.
See, that's what I was thinking.
See, that's not what she asked. See, you guys that's the thing. I think because we've all grown up with the 9th commandment is you shall not lie, which is not a terrible thing. We always have this little stop. And I think that stop is a good thing, to be honest. I think when you don't have the stop, you can be a sociopath.
Mm.
Okay? So you need to stop first of all. You need to say, if I'm not saying something truthful, then what am I really saying? And if it is a call to, say, wear camo and deceive the enemy, there's all this stuff. Like, your favorite movie could be something like Braveheart. Braveheart is all about how William Wallace deceived the British every time they were on the battlefield. He would pull up some kind of trick, right?
Yeah.
Because they thought they were going to meet him face to face, and all of a sudden, haha, psych, that kind of thing. So was William Wallace in sin? And I don't think anybody thinks on that level, because that's not what we think of when we go out into the battlefield. That's not what we think of when we go into these, especially these extreme circumstances. Like when you see someone that's literally about to die from cancer, that has been ravaged by this disease, right? You're not going to be like, well, I'm not going to lie, I'm going to call her ugly.
Right.
But to be honest, when my dad asked me that when I was a teenager, I said, yeah, I would call her ugly because I didn't know any better. As a kid, it's just like, I'm just going to be honest because that's the easier thing to do. Um, perhaps, perhaps that's the right thing to say. Perhaps it's not the right thing to say. But I think in the end, the spirit of the law is that you shall not bear false witness against your neighbor. So that against your neighbor is the huge part that qualifies you shall not bear false witness. But I will also say that if you use that, what I just said, to start feeling okay about all the lies that you've said, then you're obviously not in a good path. You're probably most likely sinning. And I would say for 99.9% of your life, there is no reason to twist any of your words. But when you come into a place where you know you need to be shrewd, where you need to be like a serpent, wise like a serpent, then you know how to use your words. That's all I'll say about that.
So I think kind of like what you were saying, because we grew up with this commandment being simplified to you shall not lie, I think even just this conversation might open up a whole kind of topic of discussion. I mean, so then, I'm just thinking of like random scenarios. Like if your kid is sick and then they say, Dad, am I going to be okay? And they say, yeah, everything's going to be fine. But you don't know that. Like you're not a doctor. You don't know. You don't know if it's going to be okay. Or like when someone asks you, like, hey, like, is everything going to be okay? Like, you give them false confidence. At times you might be like, hey, everything's going to be fine, or everything is fine. Like we don't really know that. And so, is that even lying then? Um, if someone cooked you a terrible meal and it was disgusting, and you say it's good, is that lying? Like, then at what point do
Are
we
you speaking
say
out of experience?
no, 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 no? This is not experience,
Because
but
out of experience, I've done that many times,
yeah.
but
So
not to my wife. It's just
right.
to other people.
So then, how does that like? Then is that okay? Is that not okay? I'm just kind of wondering. At what point do we draw the line then?
Yep. Great. Good question. Yeah, the ninth commandment is awesome. The ninth and 10th are really, really good, deep ones, especially because it specifically adds the word neighbor in it.
Yeah.
And it's there to qualify it. Because if you say you shall not bear false witness, then
That's
you
different.
are in a lot of trouble. Your
Right.
nation's just going to be overrun.
Yeah.
Your house will be overturned. You won't be able to survive. And so people might respond by saying, well, are you saying lying is a necessary, like, good? I didn't say any of that. I just said, if you take out the word neighbor, then you will not survive. Same thing with the 10th commandment. If you take out the word neighbor, then you will not survive. You'll be a Buddhist monk. And otherwise you can't survive, period. Because
right.
the word covet simply means what? It simply means desire.
Yeah.
That's it. So you shall not covet is not the commandment. You shall not covet your neighbor's house. You shall not covet your neighbor's wife. It continues on, right?
Right.
So you shall not covet is not the commandment. And so when we teach kids, we'll say number 9 is do not lie and number 10 is do not covet. But is that really what it's saying? And the answer is no. You have to understand that the qualifier is you shall not lie against your neighbor and you shall not covet your neighbor's things, right? Or his wife. And so that's something that needs to be taught and that needs to be explained over time. And people need to grow and mature in their understanding. Because I think the reason why, let's say you and I have a hard time with number 9 or stopping it here is because people might hear this and think that we are giving credence or we are giving an okay for people to lie.
Right.
And that's not the case.
Yeah.
That is absolutely not the case. But if we're saying absolutely all lies are sin, then you're in trouble because you can't live that life. And then people are, oh yeah, we're not going to live a sinless life until Jesus, brings us up to heaven. So there will be times where we sin. But that's not the spirit of sanctification. The spirit of sanctification is I will never sin. That's the heart. Not like, well, some sins I won't be able to help. So see, that's where we got into this mess now where our church is so weak because we've been teaching certain things where you can't, you can't lie, period. Or something like that. And it's like, well, that's not going to happen. So I guess once I go to heaven, that'll be sorted out or something to that effect.
Yeah.
But our call to live a perfect life is now, not when we're in heaven. It's now. So we need to know right now, is this a sin or not, to lie, period. I think that's why the question is so important. And, to be honest, in that Q&A panel, Ligonier, I wish they took a little longer.
Mm.
And the fact that Burke Parsons did take a little longer in his explanation, I was able to appreciate, because now you know my thoughts on it.
Yeah.
Right? And so if I am to, let's say, play ping pong against you, and I throw up the ball and I fake spinning it to the side, and then I actually spin it to the other side, is that deceiving you? Absolutely. And you get deceived a lot, yes or no?
No.
Yeah. I mean, yes or no, Junseok, does Sam get deceived a lot?
In basketball.
Right, a hezi. There you go. And those like the extra steps, those are all meant to deceive, right?
Yeah.
It's like, oh no, those are different because we're not actually saying those lies. Well, then I go to the whole acting, and I think people will be like, yeah, all actors are sinning. I was like, that's not where we are. So that's definitely not what we're saying, or what we'll say. Spying and things like that. Spying is a necessary function to have, like, for nations to survive. It's been there even in the Old Testament times, as we saw.
How do we obey this then? What does it mean to obey this? How do we practically obey this? Because I mean, you even just brought up dribbling in basketball. So I mean, Chuntuk is my neighbor. I bear false witness against this man in basketball all day, and I score points and points and points and points on him.
So I think that's a lie, and I think that's a sin. Does that make sense?
No,
but because you said it as a joke, people will laugh.
Right. So then,
is that a lie?
See, that's another
or are you bearing false witness? Now this is against Junseok.
Right.
So you're bearing false witness against Junseok. So people listening to this might think that you actually make Junseok fall down again and again and again in basketball, which has only happened once.
Yeah, I mean, I made him fall once. But so I'm just wondering then, like, what about like a half lie, half joke? Like what about an aggrandizement? What is the word?
Aggrandizement.
Like,
or even like, can you bear false witness in saying 3 factual statements that is meant to deceive?
So I think saying facts that are meant to deceive the public so that you get your way is actually bearing false witness. Does that make sense? Even though they technically didn't lie. This is what politicians do. So that's a really good point that Junseok brings up. I think that is bearing false witness, even though they technically didn't lie. So if I just state fact after fact after fact that leads you to a deceitful place, then I have deceived you. I have borne a false witness against my neighbor. And that means I am in sin, right? And so, the whole thing about that is people might take the flip. This is why we're saying we're very careful, because if you take the flip, then that means I could lie to save you, right? And then so people might rationalize,
right?
Well, I'm just saving this person. That's why I'm lying.
Right. That's another thing too.
And that's how villains are born, because villains really believe that they're doing good.
What if you give, true statements in a way to deceive, but in order to save that person? Right? Like, is that false? So for example, like, let's just say, you have an emergency drill at school and you pretend like it's a drill. Everyone's very, very calm. But the truth is, boom, there actually was an emergency, but you didn't do that to cause chaos. Like, is that lying?
I think people lie all the time. I think people lie to the babies. I see even in our church, parents are lying to their babies up the wazoo, saying, oh, this chocolate is very, very spicy. That's why the babies don't want to eat chocolate, because they really think it's spicy. That's a flat out lie. And so people do it all the time. Am I going to condemn them for that? Are we putting them under church discipline for that? Do I like it? First of all, I personally don't particularly enjoy that kind of lie, but everybody does it. Okay. And so everybody does it. I might not like it, but am I going to call it a sin? I think it might, harm the kid a little bit, especially with the trauma of first tasting the chocolate and seeing that their parents lied this whole time. But I think maybe there are better ways to keep a kid out of chocolate. But who knows? I mean, a parent might have extenuating circumstances. They might be in extreme conditions. Who knows? And so these are like, for me, these are good questions. I really enjoy it. But that's why we first need to go to the basic foundational question. That's the basic foundational question is, are you bearing false witness that your neighbor goes down and then you puff yourself up? Then that's the breaking of the ninth commandment. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So let's keep that in mind when we do anything. And instead of that, what's the flip side? When I speak, I lift up my neighbor. When I speak, I give them life. When I bear testimony, a witness, it saves them. It doesn't kill them. It doesn't go against them. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So when you speak, you should lift up the person. Not flattery, because that is a fake lifting up. Does that make sense too?
Yeah.
And so when I speak, I should genuinely lift the person up. I think that is the spirit of this commandment.
So, yeah.
Hey,
Okay.
you love this. See, this is where philosophy gets really interesting.
I hate.
And theology, first of all, philosophy was born from theology. You don't have philosophy without theology. And so, these are things that people have asked time and time again. Augustine goes through it. Aquinas goes through it. All the great thinkers go through this. Okay? And so I think it's good that you wrestle through it, but it's good that you wrestle through it with the foundation intact, right?
So, with all of what we just talked about, could you just briefly tell us what this means and how to obey it?
Yeah, I think I can. I think it is love your neighbor as yourself. And then that's how you interpret all 6 of the latter commandments. Love your neighbor as yourself. So if you're loving your neighbor as yourself, then you will not bear false witness that will go against your neighbor.
Thank you for that. And if you have any questions on that, like I do, please email us at podcast@cjsnj.org. Moving on to commandment number 10, the finale. This is Exodus chapter 20, verse 17. You shall not covet your neighbor's house. You shall not covet your neighbor's wife, or his male servant, or his female servant, or his ox, or his donkey, or anything that is your neighbor's. So then we talked about the definition of covet, meaning desire or want. So let's just kind of go into that again. When it says that you shall not covet your neighbor's blank, um, what does that mean? Does that mean it's wrong to want your neighbor's house? Maybe not exactly your neighbor's house, but a house like it. Is it wrong to be jealous? Is it wrong to aspire to be like your neighbor? What is this covering when it says do not covet your neighbor's blank?
Mm. Yeah, first of all, it's good that we defined it earlier, but we go over it again. Covet is the desire. That's the word in Hebrew, is the desire. And it's translated as covet because this is what we want to understand classically what the 10th commandment says: you shall not covet your neighbor's blankety blank. Okay. And that word covet can also mean to delight in. Is it a bad thing to delight in something? Is it a bad thing to desire? Absolutely not. It's a normal human thing. So when we cut off the neighbor part again, then you don't have the full understanding of the commandment. That makes sense, right?
Yeah.
So you can't say you shall not covet is the commandment, but you shall not covet means when we say, I'm not saying you can't say that phrase, but when we say you shall not covet, it means you shall not covet your neighbor's house, neighbor's wife, his female, male servant, ox, donkey, whatever he has, right? That kind of thing.
Yeah.
And so what does that mean? And I think we could look into the New Testament. The New Testament might help us a little bit on this, and because the word covet is also used in multiple ways. And so Luke chapter 12, a fascinating story happens in Luke chapter 12. A brother goes to Jesus and says, tell my brother to share the inheritance with me.
Yeah.
Should we read that section?
Yep. This is Luke chapter 12, verse 13 to 21. Someone in the crowd said to him, "Teacher, tell my brother to divide the inheritance with me." But he said to him, "Man, who made me a judge or arbitrator over you?" And he said to them, "Take care and be on your guard against all covetousness, for one's life does not consist in the abundance of his possessions. And he told them a parable, saying, The land of a rich man produced plentifully. And he thought to himself, What shall I do? For I have nowhere to store my crops. And he said, I'll do this. I'll tear down my barns and build larger ones. And there I will store all my grain and my goods. And I will say to my soul, Soul, you have ample goods laid up for many years. Relax, eat, drink, be merry. But God said to him, Fool, this night your soul is required of you, and the things you have prepared, whose will they be? So is the one who lays up treasure for himself and is not rich toward God.
So that kind of qualifies the early one. We could technically have ended it in verse 15, but his parable qualifies his statement. Take care and be on your guard against all covetousness. Covetousness, this word in the Greek, pleonexia, is it actually means greediness. So don't be greedy. Guard yourself against all greed. But it's been translated as covetousness. So isn't that interesting that this word that's classically used for greed is translated here as covetousness? It's correct. It is a correct translation. Because let's say in Ephesians chapter 5, verse 3,
reads, But sexual immorality and all impurity or covetousness must not even be named among you, as is proper among saints.
that is the same word, pleonexia, okay? However, there is another word that actually is translated as covetousness, but it refers back, so this might help a little bit. It refers back to Exodus, okay? And that's in Romans chapter 13, verse 9.
Romans 13:9 reads, For the commandments, you shall not commit adultery, you shall not murder, you shall not steal, you shall not covet, and any other commandment are summed up in this word, you shall love your neighbor as yourself.
So if you want to understand coveting, so that word there for coveting is a different word. It's not pleonexia, it's epithymeo. Anyway, that word is actually to strongly desire. It's to really, really desire, almost to crave, okay? And that word is is the kind of heart in which you would read the word desire in Hebrew in the 10th commandment in Exodus, okay?
Yeah.
So to covet is to really, really strongly desire, and then it goes to your neighbor's things. And because if you really, really strongly desire in the sense that it's speaking in the context here, then you really strongly desire, and it's an outsized desire. It's a desire that is abnormal. It is a desire that is unorthodox. It is a desire that is sinful. That's the greatly desire that's being implicated here, okay? And so if you look at the 10th commandment, to covet is to really desire something that is not yours, that is your neighbor's, because that's a physical thing, okay? It's physically out there, that you don't have. What does that mean? That means you believe that you deserve it. You believe that you deserve your neighbor's house, wife, male, female, servant, donkey, ox, whatever thing. That's the coveting that is being kind of explained here. And now if you think about that coveting, which ends the 10 commandments, it really just isn't like a, like a line at the end of the 10th commandment. Boom, we're done after 10.
Yeah.
But if you think about and meditate on the word coveting and to strongly desire the things that aren't yours, that lead to not loving your neighbor, and you go up. The reason why you bear false witness, why would you bear false witness? Because in the end, you want something for yourself, not for your neighbor. There is a coveting that happens when you bear false witness. And that's why you would bear false witness, because you covet something. You greatly desire something that you ought not to greatly desire. That's why you lie. That's why you cheat. That's why you steal, like it says in James, right? And so that's where the word envy comes in, which is what we kind of synonymously interchange with coveting. And so you go up, let's continue to go up that list. When you covet your neighbor, you also steal. You also commit adultery. You also murder. When you covet, you do not honor your father and mother. When you covet, you don't honor the Sabbath day, meaning you don't give God the day he requires because you want to keep it for yourself. When you covet, you take the Lord's name in vain because you don't want to honor his name, because you'd rather speak whatever you want out of your mouth because that's your greater desire. When you covet, you make objects of worship that you will bow down to, yes, that you think you're submitting to, but you're really submitting to your own innate desires. When you covet, you have another God that is not Yahweh God. It goes all the way back to number one. So when you actually covet, it is pointing to all the other commandments. So when you fail in this commandment, you're literally failing, not just metaphorically failing. You are literally failing in all the other commandments. We kind of see this when the rich young ruler goes to Jesus, and then he says, well, I've done all these things, right? And then Jesus says, well, then sell all your goods.
Yeah.
Give it to the poor and then follow me. Which was what? That's number one. That's number two. That's number three. That's number four. And it goes all the way down. Number 5, number 6, number 7, number 8, number 9. He couldn't do it because of number 10, right? Because he had a lot of possessions. He wasn't able to do it. That covetousness, that greediness, that really got him down. So that's why I think this covetousness is also something that people over thousands of years would have meditated on and would have been blown away by. And that's why when we simplify it to love your neighbor as yourself, it's not an easy thing. It's simplifying it so that we can more fully understand what number 10 is. So what does it to really mean to covet your neighbor's things? Again, coveting is not the sin. So when I say, oh, I covet your prayers, which is something that a lot of Christians say, I covet your prayers, they're not actually asking. They're not saying I'm sinning right now.
Yeah.
It means I greatly desire your prayers. So the word covet itself is not a sin when we say covet. And so I think we simplify it way too much. And then when we simplify it, just like bearing false witness, when we simplify it too much to the lie, it actually doesn't go all the way back up. But when you hit number 10, there is no escape. It goes all the way back up from 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. It goes all the way up to 1. So when you break 10, you're breaking 1. Because in the end, we can actually see how it all sandwiches together. Because when you're breaking 10, you're saying, I am not satisfied with what God gave me. In fact, I deserve this, and God did not give me that. So my great desire is for me, not in what I have, but in what I think I should have. And where do we see that played out? It's played out right at the Garden of Eden. It's right there. And it says, desiring to be wise, Eve took the fruit and ate of it. That desire is the covet. So from the very beginning, our parents coveted what they ought not to have. Why? But what did they covet? They didn't covet the neighbor's thing. There were no neighbors. They coveted what God had.
Yeah.
And that is essentially or effectively what number 10 is pointing to is, I covet what God has. I greatly desire what God has. And I don't think God should have it. I think I should have it. That's the point.
I think, today with Commandment 9 and Commandment 10 too, people tend to just oversimplify it and make it just like a hard line of, oh, this is not what you're supposed to do. So you're not supposed to lie. You're not supposed to be jealous or covet. But as we have discussed today, they are a lot deeper than that. I'm curious though, in Commandment 10, there are very, very specific things that you are not to covet. I'm wondering if there's a point to that. So, for example, his house, his wife, his male servant, his female servant, his ox, his donkey, or anything that is his. Why not just say anything that is his? Why mention these things first and then say everything?
Well, I mean, I take it as it goes from the biggest to even the smallest. Okay, your house isn't like
your
it's
physical
not.
house.
It's not.
Right,
yeah, it's not 125 Galway. That's not what the Bible means by the house. It means your whole lineage.
Yeah,
it means your entire family.
Yeah,
it means your whole name. You can't covet. I can't covet the Yang name. You can't covet the Kim dynasty. That kind of thing.
Right.
That's not. And then it goes down to your neighbor's wife, because who is the source of where your lineage continues is through your wife. And then the male servant who keeps, or female servant who keeps the house in order and check, the ox or his donkey who brings forth wealth and sustenance, or anything that is your neighbor. It goes down from the greater to the lesser. Okay.
Gotcha.
And so that's why you shall not covet your neighbor's anything, might be a good way of putting it. But the reason why this picture is there is to show us from the greatest to the least, you shall not strongly desire something that is your neighbor's. And I'm going to write it out for you. I'm going to detail it out for you so that you understand I mean business.
Hmm.
I have a question. Is our modern day sentiment that we need to tax the rich covetousness?
I think it's a lot of sins. I think coveting is in there. Envy is in there. It is definitely like they didn't deserve it, but I deserve it. So yes, I think you're right in saying that. But it's a lot of sins. I think it's also the sin of stupidity, but a lot of things, to be honest. But it's a lot of sins. But coveting is definitely one of the prime ones.
Thank you for that, Pastor Eugene. Any other comments, Jinsook, or questions? I feel like it's nice having you here. It's like a all tag team. But yeah, I think
that was an example of what people are saying is good timing, but mid material. Was that the example that we're supposed to take?
No, I think they're just haters. I sure hope they're not coveting.
Coveting your mid material or
no,
your
the
good
delivery.
timing?
Yeah, timing.
Good delivery. Okay.
But thank you for that. And again, I think this is a little bit deeper, I think, than a lot of us have grown up with in understanding the 10 Commandments. And so if you have any questions concerning any of the commandments that we have gone through, please do email us at podcast@cgsnj.org. And you have been emailing us, so we thank you for those questions, and we'll try to get those answered ASAP. With that being said, I wanted to, speaking of sin, I wanted to talk about Balenciaga. So let's talk about some current events. So more and more information is coming out about Balenciaga, and I'll mention a couple of them here. There are two separate ad campaigns, and so I want to just kind of review what we talked about even last week, and more stuff has come out. So there are two separate ad campaigns from Balenciaga. The first is a photo shoot involving Nicole Kidman and Isabel Huppert posing in a Manhattan office, and in the photo, there is a document about child sexual abuse law that was used as a prop. Also, in other pictures, there's books that are used as props, books of artists that illustrate weird, demonic child murder, bloody scenes, pedophilia scenes. Balenciaga has said that the items in the shoot, at least in the case of the Supreme Court document, they were provided by third parties that confirmed in writing that these props were fake office documents. Now they're suing the designer and producers of the shoot of the inappropriate props, $25 million. Whew. So that's the first ad. Second ad. This is for the spring 2023 campaign. The gift shop section had children holding teddy bears in bondage kink gear taken by a photographer. But Balenciaga apologized, and the photographer told Newsweek that he was not entitled to choose the products, and that he was not entitled to choose the products, and Balenciaga has taken full responsibility. And they've said that this is a poor decision. Kim Kardashian, one of the faces of Balenciaga, said that she's been shaken by the disturbing images as a mother of four, as if being a mother gives you more credit when you talk about children. I think, I don't know, it's kind of a weak move in my opinion, because it's wrong whether you're a mother, father, or a single unmarried person. But she said, as a mother, this has shaken me. And she says that she's reevaluating her relationship with Balenciaga, and but she doesn't condemn them or say that she's walking away because of the money. That money talks. So not only that, but now people are spotting Satan worship demonic themes throughout Balenciaga's ad campaigns. There's an ad with a yellow tape that reads Baal Balenciaga with two A's, Baal from the Old Testament, the god that, or the idol rather, that the Israelites would worship instead of worshiping the true God. And of course, this is a god to whom the Canaanites also sacrificed children. Baal, and Siaga. And so, I mean, this is very, very public. This is plain to the visible eye. Everybody can see this. So, how is the Christian supposed to respond, knowing that the world hates God, but seeing it just so explicitly celebrated? How do we think through this? And what do we think about Balenciaga, its products? What do we do now?
And so, yes, a number of people have come up to me and shared the disturbing news. And then, I shared with you and the staff how, how even deeper this rabbit hole goes,
Yeah.
like even with the Google Translate. And so I do think Satan is on his last legs. And this is, there are a lot of desperation moves. It's to scare, it's to fearmonger. It's to maybe make you feel hopeless, which is not the gospel. The fact that this has come out to light just shows you that truth will always come to light. God will always bring out what is evil because it's Jesus' time to reign. To be honest, like when I see stuff like this, it makes me want to be more post-mill, not pre-mill, which is weird, right? Because nothing that Satan can do can ever take away from the power of the gospel and its invasive force against the power of Hades. Hades is being exposed. People always think that they can go to the occult because their real deep desire is that satanic motto, do as thou wilt, or do what you want. But do what you want is utterly corrupt. And it is evil, and that is being exposed. And I see the whole Balenciaga, this whole like, I don't know, escapade, this whole like all these shenanigans that are going around it, and the true evil inside of this whole campaign it has been exposed. And by shenanigans, I'm talking about all these people like Kim Kardashian kind of defending it. Shenanigans. Like they obviously have no idea what they're talking about. They're protecting their bottom line. And so I don't think Kim Kardashian worships Satan or anything like that. That's why I think it's just a ball of foolishness that people are falling into. But at the same time, I do believe that the occult is there. It's been there since Hitler. Hitler was obsessed with the occult. And so he would continue on with occult practices while he was in power because he thought that, the stars could show him what the best path was for victory. And he was assured of these prophecies through his astrological practices of his number two of all his other henchmen. And he was wrong. And then when he was absolutely wrong, he killed himself because that's what they depend on. And that's what it is. In the end, if you continue to rely on the occult, you might have some victories. You might, even see some prosperity, but it is for a very, very short time. And when that defeat comes, it will be clear. It will be complete. It will be swift, just like Hitler's defeat was swift. It was complete, and he couldn't handle it. So he killed him. So he shot himself in that bunker that he holed himself up in. And I feel like that's exactly a picture of what Satan's world is looking like. And that's what I think that's what Balenciaga is doing. There'll be other people. Like I've seen videos from like other celebrities that I won't name that are saying like, oh, this is Satan's power and it's trying to get you. So you got to watch out for that. And like, there may be some truth to it, but in the end, is it leading you? And this is what I ask people, is it leading you down a path of hope or is it a path down hopelessness? Because if it's hopelessness, then yeah, I think the devil's getting you then. You better start reading the word and you better start preaching the gospel to yourself. Because Balenciaga, I assure you, is not the greatest evil out there. It is not. I think the greatest evil out there is what the Bible warns us about. And it's the wolves that are inside the church, destroying the church or trying to destroy the church. Those are the greater dangers than some occult practices that we see outside. It is disturbing because, they're trying to do this to our kids, but we'll protect our kids. Yeah. The church will always stand and we'll protect our children. It's a matter of, these sickos out there getting any credence or any increased fame. That's something that we'll fight against. And I think it's right that we speak out and speak up. I am disturbed by the things that we do, like that we see by like Apple cutting off AirPlay uh, or AirDrop. Is it AirDrop? AirDrop in China, because at the behest of the Chinese government. That to me is insane. You know, there are these protests that their lives depend on information getting, spread, and the Chinese government is in total control of, their social media platform. So when they try to just even airdrop it, Apple cuts it off. So Apple cuts off, whatever tiny glimmer of resource that these protesters had, and are there. So Apple's just terrible. And then we see like Balenciaga do this, and then we see Google Translate in cahoots. I don't even know what that's about. Why is Google Translate doing this? What's wrong with you, Google? It's moronic. It might be nefarious. It might be malicious. It could be just stupid goofball stuff too. But in the end, it's moronic. It's foolishness that will end up, in hell. It won't end up. It won't survive the wrath and judgment to come. That's for sure. And so, as Christians, what are we to do? I think we are to continue in meeting on Sundays, proclaiming the gospel, singing the gospel, preaching the gospel, listening to the gospel, and having the word of God transform us by the power of the Spirit of God.
So by Google Translate, you're talking about if you go to Google Translate and you translate from Latin to English, and you type in BA space LEN space CI space AGA, Balenciaga, it translates to do what you want, which is the motto of the Satanic Church, right?
Yeah, it's just like a little Easter egg they put in there. Maybe for who knows who. I don't know.
But it's interesting because you brought up the fact that this is actually not Latin.
It's not Latin.
And so either, and I think, you said this, either Balenciaga asked Google to put that in there, or Google did it themselves for whatever reason.
Yeah. Either way, it's moronic. It's either nefarious, malicious, or it is a very, very poor joke. I don't think it's a joke, though. Nothing to me points to this being a joke, because they seriously, there's a lot of people in Balenciaga that are affiliated with the occult. There's no denying those ties, right? I mean, look at that photo shoot. That's crazy. That photo shoot is so beyond the pale that anybody even looking at the books that were on that photo shoot, like you said, of those books that are like glorifying or romanticizing child mutilation, those are just insane. Those are like the deep end of evil. Like that's evil as evil can get, that kind of thing.
Also, if you type in from Latin to English, Balenciaga, the Baal, Baal space ENCI space AGA, it translates to Baal is the king.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. In the end, that's why people are genuinely worried about what big tech can do and what they're doing. And people want an option. This is what I've been telling my wife. As I think, look, big tech, if you want to go on the evil route, then I'm going to say that's evil and that's not good. But what I really do want is an option outside of big tech. I want a decent phone that is not Apple and Google now. I want to have an option to have a search engine that won't, modify its, results, where it won't give me the genuine ones, but they'll give me something that is, tailored to their agenda. I don't want that. And it's pretty clear now. It's out in the open now that that's exactly what big tech is doing. And so this is something that I don't like. And there are certain politicians that are speaking out against it, saying that, if we come into power, then we'll make sure it's regulated so it doesn't happen that way. That's fine. Maybe that'll happen, but maybe it won't. In the end, where does our ultimate hope lie? It lies in the gospel of Jesus Christ. So we continue to promote truth because it is by truth we are set free, and it is because of the truth we have life in abundance. And all these other lies that people are falling, headfirst into, those are the lies that lead to destruction. And so, yeah, I mean, personally, I would never buy Balenciaga anyway. And now, not even less, right?
So I mean, I was thinking about this. I mean, it's not like I would have bought Balenciaga anyway. The only Balenciaga I knew was the shoes that look like socks that Cardi B raps about. But I mean, sure, this came out about Balenciaga, but I think we'd be naive to say that there are other big companies, clothing brands that we wear personally that may have similar evil roots or evil, execs as well. So then as a Christian, like, what do we wear? How do we decide?
Yeah, and this is where, that's a really good question. This is why I told our church that my desire for our church is to grow in discernment. Without discernment, we're just being pushed around wherever the world will push us around. We're supposed to stand against the world. And how do you do that right? That means if something is immoral, we stand against it.
Yeah.
Right? If something is evil, we say, hey, that's evil. If Balenciaga does it, well, hey, that's not right.
Yeah.
That's exactly what you have to say, right? And if, let's say a shoe company is pouring money into an evil organization, it's like, hey, you can't do that. And then
Right.
we expose it because
Right,
truth
right.
is about also exposing the darkness.
Hmm.
So there's a lot of that happening now. And I think a lot of people are doing that, which I'm very thankful for, because evil cannot hide in the darkness forever. That's something that God will expose. This is something I enjoy watching. I enjoy witnessing that. And so I'm very happy for that. But in the meantime, have discernment so that you're not fallen into or given into the worldly things. Like you're not coveting something or greatly desiring this so much that you would rather listen to the serpent than to God when God says, don't eat of this fruit. And so you got to watch your desire, and you got to make sure that you keep your desires in check, and it's actually pointed correctly to the right object.
Thank you for that. Any comments, Jinzuk? I know you were especially upset about this topic.
They just came out with a new statement, Balenciaga, saying that they're putting in all these different measures and stuff. But yeah,
Too
I was
little,
just
too
looking at
late.
that. Yeah.
Thank you for that, Pastor Eugene. Next week, we're going to have an episode, and it's going to involve food. And it's going to be great. So watch out for that episode. So thank you. And we thank you for listening to this episode of the Dear Church podcast. Join us next week as we have possibly the most delicious episode we've ever had on this podcast. Tune in next week to find out. We hope and pray that this has been a blessing in your ears. Fight the good fight, finish the race, keep the faith.
Peace.